place. And let's welcome Jason Puryear.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, everyone. Um, Thank you all for joining us for this important conversation about paying for college and post-secondary education. Going to share my screen for the presentation this evening. And if you can see my screen, just want to check real quick. Give me a thumbs up or a head nod. Perfect. All right. The College Place Alexandria is a college resource center that is physically based in Alexandria, Virginia. But I work with students and families all throughout the Commonwealth on all things related to college. And we use that definition very broadly of what that word means to us. So for us, college means anything post-secondary education. So anything from a trade technical certification to a two-year degree, four-year degree, graduate school and beyond. We cover all of those avenues and more. So when I use the word college, I am talking about all of those things and not just pursuing a degree at a four-year school. If you are interested in receiving more information from the College Place, you can scan this QR code or use the Bitly website to sign up for more information. The information tends to be the heaviest for seniors during their senior year. And I reach out about the FAFSA, which is one of the financial aid forms we'll talk about this evening, applying to colleges, what to do about scholarships. And then we have a summer texting campaign that happens between the senior year of high school and the freshman year of college to help students stay on track for that fall semester of their freshman year. The title for the presentation this evening is Paying for College, and again, it's meant to cover anything post-secondary education, as you can see to the right here, for technical certifications, two-year, four-year degrees, and beyond. And this is our agenda. I'll touch on the financial aid applications first. So what you'll see in the process of applying for aid, the cost for public and private colleges will come after that. We'll touch on scholarships, then one of the financial aid tools you can use to get started in this process. And last but not least, family discussions you may want to consider having as your student heads towards their senior year of high school. So first, what are the applications that you might see? And on our screen are four of the different types of financial aid applications you may see in this process. The first two at the top are the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, and the Virginia Alternative State Aid application, or the VESA. The student status is what is important here. So as long as the student is a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or other eligible non-citizen, they would be filling out the FAFSA and not the VESA at any part of the process. So the parent's status here in the U.S. doesn't matter. As long as the student is a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or other eligible non-citizen, they're eligible to be reviewed for and receive possibly federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid. If the student is not a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or other eligible non-citizen, they'll be directed to fill out the VESA for institutions inside of the Commonwealth of Virginia, but may also be filling out the FAFSA for schools outside of the Commonwealth if they're applying. The CSS profile is a form that you may see, especially if your student is applying to private schools. It is a product of the College Board, so the same people that put out the AP classes and AP exams, PSATs, SATs. It's another one of their products that they offer to students and families in the process of searching for post-secondary options. And then last but not least, you see scholarship applications of many different types in this process as well. So we'll start with the FAFSA because for most students, this is the entry point to applying for financial aid as you're working through the college search and decision-making process. This is a screenshot of what studentaid.gov looks like today. So you'll go into this site, you'll set up your FSA ID, and I'll touch a little bit more on that in a moment. But whenever you log in, typically after October 1st, you'll always see two forms available. So I do want to mention here that it's important to make sure you're filling out the correct form for the aid year in which you're choosing to apply for financial aid. Seniors this year, as an example, are filling out the 24-25 FAFSA for the next school year for their first year in college and needing access to financial aid. But each form is live until the June 30th of the second year in the title. So the 24-25 FAFSA will be available until June 30th of 2025. So when the next form launches, hopefully October 1st, then you'll have two forms available at that time. So just make sure you're filling out the correct form. When to get started on this process, though, there's the Federal Student Aid ID or FSA ID. Wait until the senior year to sign up for this. Technically, you could right now. I wouldn't because you need to keep track of this information. But your FSA ID is tied to personal identifying information. So your full legal name, your social security number, if you have one, your birth date, and some other identifying information. So you can only ever have one. I mentioned that because for any parents who may have gone to college and have applied for aid in the past, you may have an FSA ID already. If you do, you won't create a new one for your student. You'll use your same FSA ID when your student goes to fill out their FAFSA. And then if you have any younger children that have already gone into or through college, same concept applies. You already have your FSA ID. You'll continue to use that same FSA ID for every student as they're in college, or even for yourself if you go back to school or do some continuing education beyond what you have now. You will be prompted to use either a phone number or email address to recover your information. For students and for their parent contributors, I would encourage you to use an email that's not tied to the school. Especially for students, once you graduate, your high school email address typically goes away 30 to 45 days after your graduation. And you'll want to have access to this email address every year that you're applying for aid, that you're in college, pursuing any credential beyond high school. And I always encourage students and their parents to use multiple ways to access their account. So email address, phone number. There's a multi-factor app that you can download to give you access. There's a save key and a few other options. You have some questions you can answer. I encourage you to have multiple avenues to recover this information. If you ever get locked out, it's something you may only be using once or twice every school year. So while in the moment you'll think, "Oh, I don't have any issues remembering any of this," give yourself multiple ways to recover this information, especially if you change phone numbers or if you lose access to an email account. You'll always have an additional way that you can recover this information as you go through this process. Let me see the slide on my end. So what I will say is once you submit your FAFSA, the timelines vary in terms of when you'll hear back from. So once you submit your FAFSA for most four-year schools, you won't hear back until about 2 weeks to 4 weeks after the student has been admitted, depending on the admission program. So for early decision, early action, which you'll get decisions released in December, you might not hear back for a few months. So mid-February, beginning of March. Regular decision, when decisions are released middle of February to through the middle of March, depending on the school. You may get a financial aid award letter alongside the offer of admission. So generally, I'd expect it in the spring, sometime of the senior year. When you apply, depends on when you'll receive your aid offer, but it's typically at least a few weeks after the offer of admission. Community colleges operate a little faster in some respects. So once you apply at the community college level and your FAFSA is on file with them, it's typically a business day countdown from that end. It might be 10, 14 business days or 2 weeks or so after you've been admitted that community college will get a financial aid award letter out to you. So different timelines depending on the school and when you apply for admission into the program. The same would be true for a community college. If you apply for admission in the fall, you probably won't receive anything about financial aid until sometime in mid-February, mid-March. So timing is a part of this, as well as far as when you'll receive information. And you can list up to 20 schools when you fill out your FAFSA. I encourage any student to not go beyond that number if at all possible. My recommendation is actually for a lot fewer in terms of the number of schools to consider applying for in terms of admission and financial aid. But the FAFSA gives you the ability to list up to 20 schools. And then, uh, depending on your household circumstances, uh, that will determine how many people are involved in this application. So for the student, they'll definitely be a contributor to their FAFSA form, so they'll need an FSA ID. If the parents are married, filing jointly, then only one will be identified as a contributor. But the key here is who's providing 51% or more of the financial support for the student. So if the parents have separated or divorced, biological or adoptive parents have separated or divorced, but the non-custodial parent is providing 51% or more of the financial support, they will actually be identified as a contributor, while the parent who the student is living with may not be. Timing is a part of this. So if you have questions about this as you approach your senior year, please ask your college career counselor, your school counselor, myself, and others, because some of these definitions may change as you approach your senior year. But for now, especially if you're younger in this process, watching this video, but for now, it's who provides 51% or more support. Your parents are married, filing jointly. They're both providing that support, but you only need to list one. If they're married, filing separately, both will need an FSA ID. So they'll be both identified in this process as needing to contribute to your FAFSA. And the word contributor has caused some discomfort for parents this year. It's a new term for the FAFSA starting with this year's application. Just because you're agreeing to contribute information to your student's FAFSA and you're providing consent for your federal tax information to be encrypted and transmitted directly into the FAFSA form from the IRS, that does not mean you're agreeing that you will contribute monetarily to your student's education. It's just that you're contributing information into the form and agreeing to that. From there, the Virginia Alternative State Aid Application or VESA application is a newer form that's available to students who are undocumented, had deferred action, or may be otherwise ineligible to receive federal aid. So you may be an adjustment of status, but the determination is not finalized at this point in the process. You are eligible to fill out the VESA, especially if you spend at least 2 years in a Virginia high school or graduating from Virginia high school, and there's 2 years of Virginia state tax returns that have been filed. Back taxes can be filed if your student family falls under these definitions. But keep in mind that no federal aid is awarded through filling out the VESA. So this form is not for any Virginian that is pursuing post-secondary education. It's specifically for those students who are ineligible for federal aid, undocumented, out of status here in the Commonwealth, looking to pursue education beyond high school. But a student aid index or SAI will be generated. State aid can be awarded, and then institutions may award financial aid, but each institution does this a little bit differently. So as you explore your college options, look to see which institutions offer institutional aid for those using the VESA and which do not. Legal status of the parents, much like the FAFSA, doesn't have a determination in terms of students being able to fill out the VESA and receive state aid and potentially institutional aid. Only the student's status matters in this process. The CSS profile is another form that you may see in this process of applying for aid. Like I said, it's a product of the College Board, and it is asked for by mostly private institutions. There are a handful of public schools that ask for the profile. It digs a lot deeper than the FAFSA or VESA will in terms of the process of applying for financial aid. So it asks a lot more questions about income and assets of the parents. Non-custodial parents are identified in this application as needing to contribute information to the form. So unlike the FAFSA, where they may only want one parent contributor involved in the process, the CSS profile wants everybody involved in the process. Parent that you live with, step parent that they remarried or married, then your non-custodial parent, and if they've married somebody, including the men too. So it pulls in a whole lot more information than the FAFSA or the VESA, which are both mirror applications of each other. And but you won't see this everywhere. So not every school requires this. And this is the one form in the process of applying for financial aid that may cost money. So if the student is getting a fee waiver for college application fees, for the PSAT, for the SAT, they should qualify for a fee waiver for the profile. It should be automatic, especially if the student has already used a fee waiver to sign up for and take the SAT as an example. But the form also determines that as you go through and fill out the information on the application itself. Uh, if you are unable to qualify, you may still be able to request a waiver. But if you have to pay for it, first submission is $25 and $16 for each additional submission beyond that. Uh, Non-custodial parent, when the information is requested, there is a waiver, but this waiver has to be approved by the institutions requesting the profile. So even though you fill out a waiver for non-custodial parent information to not be included, it may not be approved. So if your family dynamics are a little bit different and maybe biological parents have divorced and separated, and especially if there is little contact with a non-custodial parent, I think it's important for the parent who the student lives with to give the non-custodial parent a heads up if this form is being requested in the process. Uh, Unless there are safety reasons to not have contact with that individual, it is rare for a waiver to not be approved, or unless there's just no contact, there's no physical information that can be used to identify and track down the non-custodial parent. It's very rare for a waiver to be approved. So I mentioned that just in case any families are in that situation where you're worried about getting that information, you do have to at least make the request. And if you use a waiver, it may not be approved. So just keep that in mind as you process of filling out the profile. And be prepared just for more additional questions. If it takes you 30 minutes to fill out your FAFSA, it's probably going to take you closer to an hour to fill out the profile. It's just asking for more information uh, in terms of parent income and assets. So, what do the costs look like? On the screen in front of us are the estimated expenses for the 22-23 academic year. So about a year out of date in terms of the numbers. But generally, this is the kind of breakdown and separation you see between institutional types. So our public 2-year community colleges have the lowest cost of attendance, on average about 19,000 a year. These are national averages. I will say pulled from research done by the College Board. Our community colleges in the Commonwealth of Virginia are right around these average ranges. I mentioned community colleges because a lot of times when they advertise their price, they advertise their tuition and fee price to students and families, which is absolutely the lowest of what you'll find out of any post-secondary opportunity. But I encourage you all to pay attention to the whole bar in this part of the presentation, because if maybe parents are providing everything for the student until they graduate from high school, but once they graduate, maybe the parents expect the student to move into their own apartment, start providing some of their own cost of living. So housing and food can be an expensive component of the budget for a community college student, especially if parents are unable or unwilling to provide that additional financial support. So something that needs to be planned for in terms of the total cost of attendance. Transportation can be a large cost and expense for a community college student. You can carpool, use public transportation to get to and from campus, but sometimes you need to get to campus quicker than what those transportation opportunities offer to you. So maybe you need to have your own vehicle, access to that vehicle, the insurance, and the money to pay for gas. That's included in your transportation budget as a community college student. And there are miscellaneous expenses that sometimes add up to more than what students will see that are going onto a 4-year campus and living there away from home. But it's a conversation to have, which I'll touch on towards the end of my presentation, between students and their parents in terms of who's willing and able to cover what. Students, I don't want you to assume just because your parents have provided for everything up to the point of high school graduation or when you turn 18, that they're going to be able or willing to continue doing so once you hit those life milestones along the way. So just keep that in mind. Pay attention to the whole sticker price as you work through this process and not just what a school or institution may be advertising to you. Our public 4 years are the next least expensive option in this process. Their tuition and fees are higher than 2 years for community colleges. Housing and food can be a little bit higher, especially if the student is required to live on campus. Sometimes those costs are a little bit higher than what it may look like to rent space off campus or to still live at home. Transportation could be a little less expensive than what it could look like for a community college student. So again, as you are considering and weighing your options and you're looking at the cost of attendance, pay attention to each of these categories as you move through. For public 4 year out of state, on average, their tuition and fees are higher, although that's not always the case, both for out of state public institutions and for private institutions. Check the sticker price. Sometimes their tuition and fees is lower than what the average says here on your screen. And then our private schools cost the most in terms of their sticker price, but they also tend to be the most generous in terms of both need-based and merit-based financial aid. So I'm sharing these sticker prices with you so you get a sense of everything that goes into the cost of attendance, whether that's tuition and fees, what it costs to send the classroom and earn credit towards a degree, what it costs to feed and house a student, pay for their transportation, books and supplies, miscellaneous expenses, because all these are a part of the budget of paying for post-secondary education. But I don't want any student and family to dismiss a school just because of the sticker price. Work through the financial aid process to see what is available. I've seen some students and families relatively surprised by what a private school has been able to offer them compared to what public institutions have been able to offer financial aid process. And sometimes a private school may be more affordable to the student depending on their individual family financial circumstances than a public option. But you won't know that until you go through the process of applying for financial aid to know for sure. So one of the things in terms of scholarships that I always encourage students and families to do is apply. This is one of the reasons that you'll want to complete the process of applying for financial aid, regardless of whether or not you think you will qualify for federal, state need-based financial aid. Because when you apply for scholarships, whether that's at the institution or through private outside organizations, they're going to ask you for information that you will only be able to have if you've applied for financial aid. So if you haven't filled out your FAFSA or your VESA, then you won't have a student aid index or your SAI, which is what scholarship organizations will ask you for in this process of applying for aid. They may ask you for your student aid report. They may ask you for information about your family's household size, income information that you only will have if you've gone through the process of filling out these forms. So even if your family doesn't think you'll qualify for need-based aid, it is absolutely worth your time to fill out these forms, to work through the process of applying for aid, because institutional scholarships, outside scholarships will depend on you having key pieces of information from these forms that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. There's 7.1 billion in private funding available every year. As you can see on your screen, over 100 million goes unawarded because students simply don't apply. So start local as you begin this process of looking for scholarships. This does not have to wait until your senior year of high school. You can start now as a freshman in high school. So at the end of ninth grade, you can start looking for scholarships and preparing for this process. But go to your school counseling office, talk to your college and career counselor, utilize Naviance as a resource because your school counselors will post information there. And if the student is not checking, they're going to miss opportunities just because they're not staying up to date. Pay attention to your email and text messages and phone calls that you're receiving from resources at the school because they'll be sending information to you in many different ways to try to get this information in front of you and your student. And local scholarships are the ones that tend not to be applied for because they're smaller dollar amounts in this process. So a student may think that a $250, $500 scholarship is not worth the time, but getting 50 of those $500 scholarships absolutely adds up in this process. That's $25,000 that you can use to pay for post-secondary education. So it's absolutely worth your time. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Yep, it's 25,000. So I had to do the math to be sure in my head real quick. But give yourself time in this process. Search every year that you go through school. If especially the closer you get to your senior year, pay attention to what that senior year class is getting in terms of scholarships. Especially if it's a local scholarship or one that's only available to students at your high school or within your district, add that to your list because if somebody from your high school is getting it, the likelihood of you getting it is a little bit higher if it's a local award, because oftentimes it's meant just for you or just for your class or from someone from your home area. But cast your net as far and as wide as possible. And the reason I mentioned beginning before your senior year is because a lot of nationally competitive scholarships have deadlines that are very early in your senior year, maybe talking August, early September. And waiting until then to get started in this process puts you really far behind everybody else that's working through a really competitive process. Ask for recommendation letters early. By the end of your junior year, especially if you're applying for nationally competitive scholarships, I'd recommend letting your teachers and school counselors know before the end of the school year. So that way you give them the summer to work on their recommendation letters. They can follow up with you if they have questions about the organization or the scholarship that you're applying for. It gives you time to seek out interview prep. If different rounds of interviews are included in the competitive process, your school counselor is absolutely more than willing to help you with that if you ask them with enough lead time to help you prepare. I'd be available to help and more than happy to do so. But you got to give people notice and time to work with you in this process. Give at least 2 weeks for a recommendation letter, if not more. The more time you give your recommender to write and to really think about what they want to say about you in this process, the better. And say thank you along the way. Tell your school counselor thank you for the recommendation letter. Share appreciation with teachers and others that you get to write recommendation letters for you to review your application. Being grateful and thankful along the way helps, because maybe you're that teacher that wrote a recommendation letter for you, puts that thank you note on their desk, and then they see a scholarship that they think you're a great fit for. They're going to send you that scholarship because then that note on their desk reminds you of them every day, reminds them of you every day. And so say thank you along the way. It really helps. If you're not sure where to start, though, these are scholarship sites that we recommend students and families use as you go through the process of identifying where you want to search for scholarships. Um, these pro- these profiles will ask you questions, and the more specific you can be, the better. So if you know that you want to be an engineer, and more specifically that you want to study chemical engineering, and that you want to work in advanced manufacturing, and that you're a senior, and you're female, and you're Latina, and you speak multiple languages, you want to add all these things in to your profile so that the scholarship results that you get can be very specific to you, who you are, how you identify, your academic goals, your career aspirations. Because the more specific you can be in building your profiles in these search engines, the better the results will be. If you just say you're graduating in the class of 2025 or 2026 and you're hoping to go to college, your results are going to be very generic and they may match you, but they may not. And so I've seen a lot of students get frustrated in this process of building these profiles and searching for scholarships because they're not being specific enough in terms of the information that they're inputting. And so the results are not specific enough to get them connected to scholarships that they're eligible for and that they have a good chance of securing in this process. Another site that I recommend that's not on the screen is RaiseMe, so RAISEME. It is a micro scholarship site that not every college partners with, but for those that do, you can build your locker on RaiseMe, and this is one of the reasons it's not on our screen here. But you can build your locker on RaiseMe beginning in your freshman year of high school. So you can start securing micro scholarships right now, freshman year, and over the course of the next 3 years, just by keeping your locker up to date and adding information in as you get different achievements as you move through high school, getting an A, an honors, or pre-college course, um, getting signed up for the PSAT, SAT, ACT, going on a college tour. All these things count in terms of the process of securing micro scholarships to these sites, like RaiseMe. So make sure you're building your profile in, updating your locker as you move through each year of school. So again, you don't have to wait until your senior year. You can start now. And for students that are listening, this is where you can really help yourself and your parents out. The more you do in terms of searching for scholarships, making sure you're applying, not getting, not feeling unmotivated or feeling dismissed by a process where you might not be getting a lot of scholarships at first. A lot of these sites have scholarships that will go up for 1 month and come back down, and they start a new cycle the next month. So think of this as a part-time job starting freshman year. Start applying or at least building your database of where you want to apply for scholarships now, and work through that process on a monthly basis. The closer you get to your senior year, the more you might want to think about a few times a month looking for scholarships. And then in your senior year, you may want to be looking at scholarships on a weekly basis so that it doesn't, while the schedule might feel a little overwhelming in terms of your time commitment, the number of scholarships you might be applying for at that point might not be. Some of these sites, it takes, once you have your profile in, 2 to 3 minutes to build and send in a scholarship application. So not a lot of time once you have your profile built and you're regularly going into these sites, especially once you have your essay written for a generic scholarship application. You can retool and rework that one essay to add in and submit with an application. So it doesn't have to take a lot of your time. You do have to be organized and you have to stay consistent in this process to secure scholarships along the way. So what tools can you use? Where can you get started if you're not sure about the dollars and cents in this process? The net price calculator is actually required by the U.S. Department of Education. It provides a cost estimate of what your cost of attendance will look like, factoring out grants and scholarships, so awards that you don't have to pay back in this process. Collegecost.ed.gov is the federal student aid Department of Education site that's maintained by them. And it's supposed to be available on every college website wherever there's financial aid or admissions information. And this site, though, is as good as the information that's being fed in by the institutions. Not every institution keeps as up to date as they should with this data. So what I will say with the net cost calculator or net price calculator, it'll get you into the ballpark. It'll get you into the neighborhood of what your cost will be after grants and scholarships are factored out. But it is an estimate. So it's not going to be an exact match dollar for dollar in this process. So just keep that in mind. You can only find out what your actual net cost will be by applying for financial aid. So at the end of the day, the calculator can give you a guesstimate, an estimate. It'll get you into the neighborhood, but you won't know for sure unless you fill out the forms and have applied for financial aid. And I'll end this presentation with family discussions. This is my favorite topic because I think about when I was in the student shoes. I think about my son when I think about paying for post-secondary education, the conversations I want to have with him as he grows up about finances and money and planning ahead. But if your household was anything like mine growing up, it was none of my business what my parents earned, what bills were paid and when, what money went where. My responsibility was to be a student. I did have a part-time job in high school, so I understood what it took to earn money and to have money to pay for things along the way. But in terms of my family's finances, it was none of my business. And that's what my mom would tell me if I ever asked questions about household income and family finances, stuff like that. But I want to encourage students and parents to have conversations about money and budgeting because if you don't, the student goes into college unprepared for what's coming their way. Whether it's managing money, it may be a direct deposit that goes directly to the student of $4,000, $5,000. And especially if the student has never seen that amount of money or have had access to that type of money, it is very easy for a first time college freshman to overspend their first few months in college. And I don't want them coming back to you as their parents in the middle of their semester saying, "Hey, mom, I need $2,000 or I'm going to have to drop out of school. I'm not going to be able to finish the semester." That's what I don't want. So I'm not saying that you have to open the books in terms of your family finances and share everything that goes into your household budget on a monthly basis. But we have to make sure our children are educated about what it looks like to budget on a month by month basis to take care of the financial obligations. If they need to save money or make sure they have money set aside for expenses that are coming their way in a few months, I want you to teach them and to learn with them through this process as their parents to make sure that they have the tools to find success, but not only academically once they enroll in college, but financially, at the very least, so they don't come back to you asking for more money in the middle of the semester. And especially if you're in a situation as their parent or guardian where you may be paying a monthly payment plan to help them pay for their cost of attendance. The last thing you need at that point is them coming back to you and asking for more money on top of what you're already deciding to contribute towards their cost of education at that point. Talk to your kids about borrowing money. If you have a home mortgage you're paying every month, if you have a car note that you're either still paying or recently paid off, talk to them about what it looks like to pay those types of expenses long term. Because especially for a lot of teenagers, if they haven't had exposure to that type of debt that you pay for 5 years, 15 years, 30 years, the concept of borrowing money doesn't really mean anything to them in real terms. Thinking 15, 30 years down the road in terms of what money costs them that long term, it has no meaning. It has no definition for them. So share what planning for those types of expenses looks like in terms of what it means that you have to plan for in your household budget, and also maybe some of the sacrifices that you have to make in terms of keeping up with those expenses as they come along. Because I want students to set healthy borrowing limits if they're choosing to borrow money to pay for school. And every family has a different definition and different number as far as what that healthy student loan amount looks like. Talk to your kids about transportation costs. If you're keeping them on your auto insurance policy or not, do they need their own car insurance at that point if they're getting their own vehicle? Are you going to be able to help them with that vehicle cost, or is maintenance and gas going to be on the road and going to depend on their budget as a college student? Are you going to keep them on your health insurance plan? Are they going to need to pursue health insurance on their own? Does their college require it? And maybe the family is in a space where they're not able to afford health insurance as a household right now. What are some things that the student has to have that maybe they don't have available at home? Have these conversations, discuss all these things as you look at what it costs to be on a college campus year by year. Bills and entertainment. Does the student need to go to a concert that maybe they have a part-time job for, that they've been saving up money for? Or maybe would that be better served to help them pay for their education? Is there a balance between the two? What are things that the family can do to save money together? Even if it's small amounts of saving, $10 here, $20 there, every little bit helps. But what can the family do together to work towards helping the student be in a position to be able to pay for college? If the student is still living at home, are you as their parent providing food for them the same way you did when they're in high school? If so, that's a way to save money. But if not, how can the student contribute in a way that's sustainable for them from a financial standpoint that doesn't break their budget as a college student and doesn't ultimately end up costing the family more in terms of them paying for school? Where are they going to live? On campus, off campus, with an apartment, with friends? Talk to them about all these things and have open conversations with your students about what all these things cost and what it takes to manage these things. What are security deposits? What are credit and background checks? These are things that they may have never had any exposure to. But you as their parents may have exposure to these things on a regular basis every year in terms of your living circumstances. So share this information with your student so they're prepared for what's coming their way. Uh, and have honest conversations about what is feasible financially and what's not. Sometimes schools are on the student's college list and they're just simply not attainable unless the student applies for a lot of scholarships. I'd rather a sophomore or junior know that now. So then you light the fire under them to apply for scholarships every year. So that if they know that if they want to make a school affordable, there's work they have to do in this process. I don't want this conversation to happen right now in senior year. Maybe it's the only school they get into, but it's unaffordable. So is it really an option at that point for the student and family to afford? Maybe, maybe not. If you're having these conversations each year as you build up to senior year in the college application process, the student will be better informed. The family will feel more certain about the types of decisions that will be available to the student. And ultimately, what the student will end up deciding for themselves. The more you can have these discussions about finances, the better prepared the student's going to feel. The more relief the parents will feel in this process. The more assured you'll feel that your kid will make a good decision, and one that they can afford, and one that will allow them to live successfully after college graduation once they're out in the workforce, and so that they won't again at that point had to move back in because maybe you gotten rid of their room in terms of their living space at home. For parents, maybe you've used that as an opportunity to expand your master bedroom into truly a master bedroom, knocked on a wall, or added in a bathroom. have conversations with these students about paying for things along the way and healthy budgeting. It'll help everybody out along the way as well. But that's it in terms of my presentation. My contact information is here on the screen. If you have any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to reach out. The College Place, my services are a free resource to students and families. So I will never ask you for money or charge you anything for your expenses. I don't charge schools anything. It's an entirely, completely free resource for you to use as you navigate this process of searching for your post-secondary destination for the student. My name is Jason Puryear. You can call me. Students can text me, email me. Any way is a good way to reach out to me if you have questions in this process. And then you can scan this QR code again or use this bit.ly site to sign up for more information from the College Place. And I'm going to pull up the chat just to make sure there are questions I can answer.
Jason, there was a question if there was any information you know about 529 that you can share.
Yes, 529 plans. And this is before I answer that question. This is where I will share that I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA. So those individuals are best resourced in this area to answer more questions that you may have, and then your 529 provider themselves. But if the family or maybe grandparents or other family members have set up a 529 for students, it can be a great resource to utilize to pay for post-secondary expenses. It is reported as an asset once funds are dispersed, typically on the student's FAFSA in future years. But for more specific questions about 529 plans, I'd go back to your plan administrator and ask them about how that resource is utilized. I do know that if the 529 is in a grandparent's name, it's not reported on the FAFSA initially. It's only once disbursements are made to the college to help the student pay for expenses, it'll be reported as an asset in terms of dollars received in the financial aid process. But anything beyond that, go back to your plan administrator and ask them to know more details on that end. Any other questions? And you can either drop it in the chat or unmute and ask.
Do you see any questions, Anade? I don't see any other questions. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Puryear, for joining us again. We appreciate it. I did want to say to everyone that's joining us tonight that all the sessions are recorded. So I know there was questions about scholarship searches and things like that. The session that Mr. Puryear did was recorded and we have it posted on our past events. So I'll make sure when I send the follow-up email to everyone with today's recording and today's PowerPoint, that also have the link to past events. So you're more than welcome to go back and review that presentation. The other thing that I have placed in the chat is our survey for today's session. As always, we do want to hear from you of any feedback that you can provide as we prepare for the upcoming school year to provide you more programming that you do want to see. And so again, thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.